do in-person and virtual at the same time. We've done in-person, we've done virtual, we got a combination thereof. So I need everybody to be understanding to us that's listening, and those that are participating, I need you to be understanding with us also. And I do want to say, I don't know which one I like the best, virtual or in person. I had to leave home and smell dinner as I went out the door. I was like virtual. But since we're here, we'll make the best of it. You know? I know he's always thinking about eating, but
you can live off the fat of that.
I can. That's kind of what my wife said. You ain't gonna starve when you get back. So, all right, folks, let's get started. While we're holding this meeting in person, it also will be available in its entirety. Will be streamed on the county's YouTube channel, available at the global site, https://www.youtube.com/c/Orange County, Virginia. There is limited in-person seating. Once that seating is completely occupied, there's no vacancy sign to go up, and no one will be allowed in until someone leaves. If you leave, you may lose your seat. So restroom breaks may cause you not to have your seat, because if somebody's waiting, we're gonna let them get it, because we're not gonna quiz who's going and what they're doing, just so we know. We do have some folks off in virtual land, and I'm gonna ask them before I determine a quorum to identify themselves, starting with Mr. Yancey, District 2.
Yes, this is George Yancey. I am the District 2 Planning Commissioner. I'm located at my home tonight due to the fact that my wife had knee surgery. So therefore, I've rushed home from the hospital to be able to participate, and may have to be called away at any time if the need be.
Thank you, Mr. Yancey. Also, we have Mrs. Thornton, one of our planning services personnel. State your name and where you are tonight also, please.
Sandra Thornton, Planning Services Manager, and I'm at my home in Louisa.
Okay. Now we can determine from sight that Mr. Capella is here, Mr. Zolmaker is here, Mr. Hutchinson here, and Sir Lumber here. So we do have a quorum. We ask for the approval of agenda or adjustments if necessary.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda with one change, and that is to add the general public comment period in for item 4B.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Moved and second that we will add 4B, a general public comment onto our agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Mr. Head, Mr. Yancey, I didn't hear your aye.
I said aye.
Aye, okay. Okay, looks like it carries unanimously. Okay, we have the approval of the minutes of the May 6th regular meeting. You should have them in your packet. I solicit a motion for that approval, please.
So moved.
That's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
That's been moved and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Motion carried unanimously also. We have no new business. Just so folks understand, this is our second meeting of the month, so this is our shorter meeting, we hope, and we kind of push through things pretty rapidly. It's not designed for us to take up a lot of different things, but just a couple things. All right. Public comment, we do have someone signed up for the public comment. We ask you to come up, state your name, your address, your affiliation. If you're not speaking for yourself, if you're affiliated with the company, we ask you to limit it to 3 to 5 minutes with emphasis toward the 3. Mr. Bill Speeden is on our list.
Mr. Chairman, I have comments on 2 of the items tonight, on the solar panels and one on Lake of the Woods, Rutsley Corridor.
Okay, so if you would do me a favor and speak on the Lake of the Woods corridor first and then the solar second, I would appreciate it.
Okay, well, Donald, I think we spent a few years together on the planning commission.
We did.
And one thing we did back there, I'm Bill Speeden, for those who don't know me. I was on the planning commission 28 years, and Donald Brooks suffered under my chairmanship for 10 years.
I know you stated your name, but your address and
I'm sorry,
affiliation.
my name is William H. Speeden, 12046 Blue Hill Drive, Scuffletown, Virginia. All right,
All right.
anything else? I'm not affiliated for this comment. Back then, must have been 15, 20 years ago, a lot of problems came up around the Lake of the Woods area. And we decided at that time that we would try and get a policy of how to forward develop the area for the Lake of the Woods. And we did have a policy in our pocket. When we went to the Lake of the Woods, we had a public hearing there, about 50 people turned out. And the way we guided it was, you guys tell us what you want, and we'll try and incorporate it into our plan or our comprehensive plan or whatever we're working on at the time. Well, we spoke for about 20 minutes or so and asked the people from Lake of the Woods, what did they want? And they kind of looked at us, I don't know. Well, do you have anything? They said, yeah, well, we happen to have this in our pocket. Now, this was the basic plan then. The basic plan then that we had in mind was to let Route 3 corridor become downtown Lake of the Woods, put all the lights in you wanted or needed over time. And to get traffic through the area, start on the other side of Wilderness Road, come with a limited access highway between Route 3 and the Rapidan River, come out on the western end, on the other side of Germanic College. And they all thought that was a great idea. Great idea. So we incorporated in whatever we were working on at the time. And it's probably sitting on the shelf somewhere in the office. But that's just give you something to think about when you approach this. If whatever you do with this corridor thing, if it gets too dense in there, that'll be the end of that project. No matter what, you're going to have two downtown Lake of the Woods. But in any case, that's up to you. I'm just throwing that out for your thought process. And the public hearing, do you want to speak on the solar panels?
Yes, sir.
Now or later?
Right now.
Right now. Okay, well, you, Donald, for years have been saying, well, why didn't you come in earlier and give us your input? Well, the Farm Bureau has been giving you input. And we are concerned about this. We're not for it or against it particularly. But we do want it open to our farmers to be able to have solar panels properly sited and the county properly protected. And Madison County has some great ideas on that. Decommissioning is a big thing that we have to worry about towards the end. In developing the process, of course, erosion could be a problem, but that should be covered under the soil conservation permit and the special use permit. But the siting is important, screening is important, but not rambunctiously. But this is an opportunity for some farmers who can make $1,200, $1,400 an acre a year rent for this thing. It beats the hell out of raising corn or milking cows. I've done both. And it put up solar panels and it properly orchestrated. The county can make money on this in Texas. If you build out the property like one near True Blue, and the threat's been made, you know it, and you put a house on every 2 acres, every house it puts in, what the numbers of, for every dollar they pay in for taxes, costs the county $1.25, whereas the farmer, for every dollar pays in, the county costs the county about 70 cents. So the county can make money in these things. And you're a whole lot better off with the solar panels where properly sited and properly screened. And you have all the bullet points that we've given you before. I'm not going to go through all them and hold your time on that. That's the end of my comment. Thank you. Any questions?
No, sir, Mr. Speaker, we should not have any. Thank you for your participation, and we will certainly take what you said in consideration. Is there anyone else that wants to speak that did not sign up? Mr. Hutchinson, come up, sir, state your name, and which item are you speaking?
So,
So,
I'm Andy Hutchison, 11522 Jones Mill Road, Orange. Concerning solar and kind of backing up a little bit about what Bill said, this is probably more from me personally as opposed to maybe Farm Bureau. I don't know. Kind of gets back and forth, but I really think that the county needs to have, you need to have something. You need to have some kind of guideline. You know, we want to, or I would like to see it fair to the citizens as well as the solar companies. And based on what I've seen on the last couple of meetings, you know, Orange County wants to be known as business friendly. Well, watching those meetings, if you were a business, you would wonder, well, why would I go there? Most especially solar, because it's in too much disarray. I mean, with no guidelines moving forward with the SUP, I don't know how a company could come into the county and know what was expected. So I think it's very important that the planning commission or the board come up with some sort of a guideline, ordinance, or combination of both. And from a Farm Bureau standpoint, we're definitely willing to help in any way we can and be a part of the solution. We do not want to be a problem. We want to be the solution for our producer members. And we want to be the solution for the county citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Comments will be considered as we mull through this. Andy, I didn't get it. Maybe somebody else did. Give me your address again.
11522 Jones Mill Road.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Well,
Is anyone else wants to comment that did not sign up? Going once, going twice? Public comment is closed. Next thing we have on the agenda is a continuation of the public hearing on SUP 20-05. Before we ask the applicants, we will ask the county to give us an update and where they think they are. And I think Mrs. Thornton is going to do that. So the monitor, please.
Good evening. The primary issue still remaining for your consideration after your May 6th meeting was a review of the proposed conditions that might be attached to an approval of this pending special use permit. Subsequent to that meeting, Director Gillespie conducted a site visit to the subject property and found that considerable clearing had occurred since we initially received the special use permit application submittal. And the most notable areas of clearing were along the western property boundary of tax map parcel 50-4, which is adjacent to the property owner's parcel, which is the site of turkey houses. And also north of the proposed project boundary on that same parcel. While there has also been clearing on the northern partial of the adjacent tax map parcel 50-4A, which is also part of the proposed project site, there is remaining a significant vegetative buffer along the northern and eastern portions of the proposed project boundaries. On May 12 and 19, staff discussed with the applicants the existing conditions with respect to the installation of buffering, which would be expected to achieve adequate visual screening of the project from Catharpin Road and adjacent properties. The applicants have proposed a new buffering plan, which includes extension of the vegetative buffer adjacent to Catharpin Road to the west onto tax map parcel 50-3. As well as supplemental planning and revegetation. And so we have submitted for your consideration a somewhat revised set of conditions that the staff is recommending. I would also like to note that during our discussion yesterday afternoon, the applicant requested consideration of amending the final proposed condition regarding the decommissioning plan and bond such that adjustments would be requested every 5 years rather than every 3 years, and that revenues from salvaging materials would not be excluded. And I just offer that comment to you for your consideration. I'm glad to review the proposed conditions if you'd like at this time, or just let me know how you'd like to proceed.
Commissioners, is there any questions you would have, and do you want those conditions reviewed with you? Or do you just want the changed conditions reviewed?
I have a question.
Sure,
Mr. Chairman.
sure.
So that last thing that you said about the decommissioning, has that edit been made in the conditions?
No, it hasn't. I don't believe, the staff didn't, we listened to their comment and, we think it has merit, but we did not necessarily agree that that would be something we would recommend. So we are just offering that information for your consideration. I know that representatives of the applicant's team are present with you this evening, and they may wish to address that in more detail if you are inclined to entertain some discussion.
Would you repeat the change, Ms. Thornton, please? You said 5-year intervals, and then what about the salvage materials?
That there's the way the language reads right now, it indicates that the applicant shall engage a third party to produce for the county's review a decommissioning plan sealed by an engineer licensed in Virginia and a cost estimate to complete this work minus anticipated revenue from salvaging materials plus a 10% contingency. They, as I understood it, they were requesting that we would allow them to still include in that estimate, I mean, not to reduce it by the cost of, or rather the revenue from salvage materials.
Just bonds. Bonds are there in case in theory, everything goes well and maybe the 30-year life ends and they decommission and the bond doesn't even come into play. The bond is there to protect the county in the event that the business fails and we're left with solar panels and we have to deal with it, right?
Correct, yeah.
Any other questions based on those questions from any other commissioners?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead.
So maybe I'll just ask that.
Okay,
Because I'm trying to understand the salvage piece. So they're saying they don't want to include the salvage now, and so that's kind of a trade, 5-year interval. Hold on, because
We'll call him. We'll call him.
Yeah, thanks. Anyways, I'll wait, Mr. Chairman, that's the applicant's time. Thank you.
okay. Any other commissioners have any comments or questions at this point of the comment?
Sandra, what's the setback from Carthon Road?
This, I need to double check that. I should know off the top of my head, but just for a building setback, is Mr. Hutchison, is that what you're
Yes.
asking? Yeah. The setback from a secondary road is with a right-of-way of 50 feet or more in width shall be 35 feet from the right-of-way.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I have two. Based on the conditions that we reworked and brought to them, Sandra, is the county satisfied with what is proposed?
Yes, I mean, the staff is recommending what is before you.
And it covers the concerns that were addressed or announced at the last meeting?
We believe so. I mean, it seemed that the primary outstanding concern was sufficient visual screening. And there had been somewhat, general agreement, I think, at a prior meeting that the graphic representation that the applicants had previously submitted for screening along Catharpin Road, appeared to be adequate, to achieve that visual screening. There was concern, and we had considerable discussion, especially after Mr. Gillespie had been out there and had seen the degree of clearing that apparently the property owner had already accomplished, that there might be a need to extend the buffering along the road to the west to just increase the screening for travelers on the road coming from that direction. The applicant's revised plan has, indicates that screening. And of course, during site plan review, the final site plans will be reviewed for compliance and consistency, with the condition as it has been, the intent of the condition.
Thank you. So the second question is, the way I read the intervals, it was the county may in 3 years. It reads to me, the county may request these adjustments at 3-year intervals. It doesn't mean that the county will, just says the county may.
That's
Help
correct.
me understand why I should consider from the county perspective, one or the other, 3 or 5. Josh, you can help,
Sure,
just help me.
Sure. Well, I mean, a more frequent interval is more likely to have current information. And so 3 years is more likely to be more current and more accurate. Every 5 years is more extended and less likely to be current.
What's the general practice? If you don't know, you say.
I mean, this is there's a kind of a global universe of practices that are out there. And I would certainly say that the applicants can speak to the dynamic industry that they're in, that some things are beginning to settle down. 5 years is a norm, whether it is the norm or general practice. I wouldn't be able to give you a best answer. The only way to have a current assessment, appraisal, or otherwise evaluation is to request the current assessment, appraisal, or evaluation. So anything that's dated is necessarily dated. It may be higher or lower. So 5 years is a standard that's used some places.
The reason I ask that is because if you look at just the housing market in the last 18 months,
Absolutely.
it's gone phenomenally something. I was gonna say crazy, but that's just not a proper term. It's just gone. 2x4s and building material in the last 18 months have, if I'm waiting 5 years to catch that, how am I gonna do it is my thought. So I'm thinking the sooner the better, but that's just my brain working outside of its space. It's got a lot of space up there. So it's outside of its space. I'm trying to wrap my head around what's best for the county, not what I think, but what's best for the county. That's the reason I asked that question. If somebody was wondering why that question was asked, it's just for the commissioners, so I'm just trying to figure out what's the best for the county, not what's best for the project. I need to worry about what's best for the county in this particular, that particular issue. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may just piggyback onto Mr. Gillespie's, comments about, having an interval that would provide more current information. There are other localities that do use 3 years. I mean, I did a little bit of research, so I didn't pull
Thank you.
I didn't pull the 3 years just out of the air. So I know that it is it is in practice in some places.
That's the follow-up I need to hear, we just didn't arbitrarily grab it, it's a practice. All right, any other questions?
Just one comment, Mr. Chairman. When we get there, I want to understand what they're proposing on the salvaging.
Okay.
So
And then
just
we can
because that's
ask them that, because it's attached.
Well, yeah, and I don't know yet.
Yeah, I understand that part. I was just trying to wrap my head around how we got to, Sandra kind of got me there. How did we get there?
Yeah.
What baseline we used?
The way it's worded now, and I don't know if this is correct, we'll get there, it says that, the value, the revenue, or the cost is every 3 years minus the cost of the materials, because you can recycle materials. Now, if they're saying, if they're trading, like, hey, rather than every 3 years, I want to do 5 years, but we're not going to include the salvaging.
Then you're saying there's some profit.
I'm saying that might actually result, if you're not subtracting the salvage costs out of the bond, you might actually end up with a higher bond, but I don't know what they're, we'll get there.
Okay.
Hey, don't get too close, Johnson. Don't get too close.
Okay, any questions based on those comments and questions that we had for the county at this time? All right. We'll ask the applicants to come up and probably try not to talk in unison, try to individualize who you are and what you are, and try to address what we were talking about. We don't need to recap about the whole project. What I want to recap about is what we addressed, and you can do it in the order you want.
Hi, thank you for having me back, Doug Hartman with EDF Renewables. So just to clarify there, I think got a little mixed up. So I think there was a misunderstanding whether or not salvage would be considered. We would like salvage to be considered. Our recommendation on 5 years was that all of our agreements are in 5-year intervals. So the thought process was, if you also do 5-year intervals, then you would be most likely to have an estimate in the year that we would be removing the facility. So we were thinking, well, if you did 3-year intervals, then you'll line up at years 15 and 30, but the project would most likely be 25, 30, or 35-year overall lifespan. So if you kept 5-year intervals, then you would have one at 25, 30, and 35. So that was the general logic, was that we thought it actually might just be more beneficial, more accurate, because the only time you would be decommissioned on, call it a not 5-year interval, would be, call it some sort of like catastrophic event that ends the project.
So is your project significantly different from the one that the staff researched and thought that 3 was, when is your facility going less likely to be in existence or more likely to be in existence? I mean, what's the anomaly with you?
Given that we have ODEC here in the room that we are providing power to, I'd like to think that the facility will be in existence for them for the life of the anticipated lifespan, which is 35 years. I will say that we are agreeable to either 3 or 5. The 5 recommendation was just that we thought that would just line up better with the most likely years of decommissioning, right? So take the example of if we decommissioned at 35, but which is if it extended through its entire life, it would be a 35-year project with the current agreements. You would have to rely on an estimate from year 33. So that's what we were thinking, well, most likely ends 35, hopefully, fingers crossed. So then you would have an estimate from 35. Obviously, best case, you have a willing project owner that comes and removes it at that point, but if somebody is unwilling, whether they just don't want the hassle or whatever it may be, I can't predict that. But then I was thinking, well, at least you would have the most up-to-date estimate based off of when the project is most likely to end. I guess that's really the thing.
So help me with this, and I always wanted to ask this. What's gonna go bad in solar? If I have an engine, I know that I got piston rings and wear and tears that down. I know if I have paper, it disintegrates after a period of time, wood rots and all that. So what goes bad in 35 degrees and so?
Well, so actually the number one thing that you have in solar is called light-induced degradation. So just as if you've left anything out on your porch for a year or two, you see that UV light breaks things down, right? It breaks stuff down. So we do have basically just a standard ratio that you assume the degradation in terms of output. But at the end of 25 years, a standard panel could probably still be producing at least 80% of its output, its rated output. So that's really the kind of the standard metric of what's going to go wrong in solar is you're just going to end up with less and less power over time. Eventually, you get to a point that you're either going to be replacing modules or you typically, as long as the modules are producing power, they're worth something, right? People want electricity. But with the value of or the cost of modules going down, and then kind of thinking 35 years out in terms of degradation, it might be a worthwhile thing for somebody to kind of revamp the facility at that point.
So a facility like you build, since I've got it, I'll turn on to other questions in a second, but a facility like you build, is there one built anywhere similar to it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I personally
Stick
know
with
about
me.
30 of these.
Stick with me. What's the length of time they've been built? The oldest one you know of, in other words.
Oh, the oldest project I know of?
No, not the oldest project, the oldest project like you built.
Well, I've been in the industry for 9 years. The oldest one that the oldest one I have personal experience with 2008. I know there are projects like this that have occurred sooner.
So throw out a year, I won't know the difference whether you told me 2 years or 50 years, I really won't, I'm at your disposal on that. So, but throw out a year.
I'm gonna guess a project like this, probably first one occurred in mid 2000, around 2005.
So
The
we're
first
20 years
community-
old.
Yeah, the first community solar project in the world happened in 2008. I used to work for that company. So that is the spur of community solar. This is kind of a community solar-esque project. It's not really a community solar program, but some of the cooperatives are choosing to treat them as community solar projects. So in that regard, the first community solar project in the world was done in 2008 in Colorado.
2008 is what you're saying.
Yeah, in Colorado.
Anybody else have any questions? As far as we've got, we'll get a little further. No, I thought just, anybody else got any questions based on what we just covered? You can continue, but I'm just trying to figure this here. I didn't understand what you said about salvage. Did you say we made a mistake or?
I think there was just a miscommunication. We would like to include salvage, so I think.
So
if the
salvage will be in there at all
language
times?
We would like it to, yeah. So typically the case against using salvage is when you have jurisdictions that do not want to periodically update the bond amount. So basically, the idea being, I don't want to forecast 35 years what salvage is worth. But anytime that we're doing periodic intervals, we would want to include salvage, we'll have an up-to-date estimate of that.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us or any,
Well, I would just say that one of the earlier comments in the night that for the viewers and your constituents, I don't think this county is anti-business, and I don't hope none of the previous meetings came off that way, because I found the staff to be fantastic to work with, and I think it's really actually telling that they have gone through the difficult issues with us when there is no guidelines, and we're still here today working with you. So I hope it's not seen as anti-business, because I think it's been a great county to work with.
I don't think that comment was directed the way you took it. The comment was directed that we don't really have a template for accepting solar.
Yeah.
So it's confusing to figure out whether you're following that template or the guidelines of the SUP or the ordinance or whatever we have. Since we don't have it, it's hard for the citizen to look at it. You're privileged. You eat and drink solar.
Yeah.
But most folks don't, so that's what that comment was about. And the only reason I know that because the guy who made the comment, I know that guy pretty well.
Well, thank you. That is all I have. So if you have questions for me, happy to answer. But thank you.
Commissioner, do you all have any questions or comments or thoughts or where are we here?
What do we think about the 3 or 5, the way presented it was that the likely end date is 20, 25, or 35. And if it were 5 years, it would ensure that we had the most updated bond at the most likely end state of the project. 5-year intervals, where 3 years, 3 years could put us, like if it ended as his example, or another example, let's say it ends in year 20, the nearest evaluation would be 18 years, not 20 years. Right, so 5 years puts you at, but the risk is that it ends in year 21.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
so,
go.
so it's, I don't know which is better.
Well, but
It's risky.
I think the way that the staff has done it is perfect. I personally think. They said, the staff, the county may request these adjustments at 3 year intervals. The county may not request it. The staff is, we hire the staff to be competent and good caretakers and watchers for us. If they don't do that, then we have staff to attend with. But if they do it, they got 3 years they can do it, or they can do it in 6.
Yeah, I don't know
Which
how
will put them at the 5th one, put them beyond the 5th one, but they can pull it. The staff couldn't do it any sooner than 3, but they could do it in 6, they could do it in 9. You know, at 3 year intervals, that interval will get there, it's just how do you get there? I see what you're saying, I just rather for a project that, again, listening to the public comment, that the template is not written.
Right, yeah,
Let's err on the side of more frequent than not frequent.
yeah. I'm, either way, it was an interesting point, I hadn't really thought of it in those terms.
Any thought process on what we were discussing there? I mean, y'all got Mr. Yancey, are you still with us? I mean, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, what are you thinking?
Mr. Chairman, it's customary in the industry, it's generally 3 years. I also have a challenge with the valuation of the, I guess you call it reclamation of the solar panels. We have no idea in 20, 25, 30 years whether the value is going to be anything, number one, and two, it may be a situation where they have to pay somebody to take it away. So therefore, there is no residual value. And furthermore, allowing the applicant to select an engineering firm to make the determination of what that bond value should be in the beginning is almost like letting a fox in a chicken house or a turkey house. Therefore, you're allowing them to predicate what is going to happen. The county has no say-so and no control and no monitoring whatsoever. So as a former business person and a banker, I think that is just an absolutely ludicrous request.
Okay, anything else?
Furthermore, my last point is that in November of 2017, there are sitting up there 3 members and myself that voted on the first solar farm approved in Orange County. We required that applicant to have a 50-foot buffer around the property completely, except for the frontage on Route 20, which had to be 100 feet. I don't understand why we are bowing to this applicant to have anything different than we did require of the first applicant. I understand, and Mr. Capel is correct, it was not in the comp plan. However, it was prudent action taken by 4 members of this commission back on that day, and also approved by the Board of Supervisors a month and a half later. So I remind you of that going down the road, because we've got more of these coming. I got a call this week from somebody wanting to talk to me about another one. So, you know, it's coming, and we better be prepared. And I'm disappointed in a lot of ways, but at the same time, um, I understand the farmers are financially strapped because of the pandemic and the business itself. However, I don't think this is revenue neutral or revenue positive for Orange County and its citizens. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any other commissioners?
Just a comment, I can only explain, my logic on this. First of all, with respect to civil engineers, I mean, every building that we have, the developer selects their own engineer. And that engineer's stamp is certification that it's good to go. So I don't think, what would be ludicrous, what would be ludicrous to me would be doing something the opposite of what we do everywhere else. What would be ludicrous would be the county selecting the engineer for the business. And that's unusual. We don't usually do that. So my logic on that is that we require what we require many other businesses to do and engineers require. And that's to have a state licensed engineer, that's reputation is on that stamp. As far as the buffers, again, not arguing with Mr. Yancey, all I can do is describe my logic. So the big difference here is that the landowner on the two sides with the 35 foot buffers, it's the same landowner. It's not a different landowner. So in the other place, we were screening the solar farm from people who didn't own the land adjacent, or from from different property owners. So the sides where there are different property owners, there's way more than 50 feet of screening buffers on the site. And then as far as the road, we could read what the setbacks are on Route 20 versus Catharpin Road, but there's a huge difference between Route 20 and Catharpin Road as far as traffic and visibility and everything else. So, I share Mr. Yancey's concern with screening. I've been a very consistent voice on these sorts of things. And so, from my point of view, I don't think we're really doing anything different. We're taking into consideration the site and the differences between this site and that site and applying sound logic to the situation. So I don't really, personally, I think it's adequately screened.
Any other commissioner?
I agree with Mr. Hutchison, not me, Andy.
I was gonna say, Jim, you let off with that. I was wondering, bring what yourself.
I'm not best listener. And at least from my standpoint, we need standards, not only for the commissioners and the board to do their business, but for the applicants to know exactly what needs to be done, and for the citizens so that they can read and they know and understand. We don't have those. The last 3 months has shown every time we meet, something new comes up. And there's a ton of other things we probably haven't thought of. We haven't addressed adjacent properties. We haven't addressed standards for decommissioning. And you could go from a litany. The Farm Bureau has a whole ton of these things. So, and just from Mr. Capel, who knows what Carthman Road is going to look like 20, 25 years from now? We don't know. Setbacks have many purposes and many reasons. I have a concern on buffering and the setback because it's not just for today, it also affects tomorrow. What's that land use going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now? We've got to make sure that we do our planning properly. And that's my comment.
You wanna weigh in?
No, I think that's really wise words that you just said.
See, you heard Ms. Hutchinson too. I grapple with this. While it's new, it's still just basic good governing, whatever the industry is. Good governing comes from expert advice. And that's why we hire good people in the county to help and guide us. Because commissioners and board of supervisors, we can't do it all for all these different projects and things that come before us. But I do struggle with, I thought that the applicant, you know, everybody has to have a buffer. That's the biggest thing. And then had we not had the due diligence of the county to go and look again, we would have no buffer. Then I get to that the county looked and they feel that it's adequate. The person who found it inadequate now finds that it's adequate. I talked with the legal advice and they're saying that we're not really setting a precedent if we approve this. That doesn't mean that everyone's gonna have a 35 setback. That doesn't mean everybody's gonna be able to have that same thing. It's not etched in stone. It's just this project. But my concern is that everybody has. And this is where, and I'll say it open, Jason and I have butt heads. This is where we come together with heads. We've gotta have the template for things like this. We've got to have it in place. I'm not persuaded though. So for those who are wondering how you want to persuade me, I'm not persuaded that it has to be an ordinance. I'm persuaded that it should stay SUP with a checklist and template for each and every one of them. I'm going to say this, and I'll say this in open. If you make it by right, you couldn't by right get yourself some problems. I'm gonna promise you that. If you leave it at SUP where we got some control, then we still control it. I don't like everything that's in this, and I don't even know which way I'm gonna vote. But I cannot say that I feel that the county would make it a bad move if it did, but I do think it's who am I gonna trust if I can't trust the staff? And they kind of agree that it's okay. I just don't know. I don't like everything about it, but I just don't know. I do know this. We need to make adherence to this moratorium until we get something in place after this is done, or we're gonna be in a little trouble here because this is coming on us pretty fast. I got a call this morning, the guy supposedly knew what he was talking about. I don't know, he's telling me stuff that we got 5 lined up for the county. We ain't 5 ready. Any other comments, questions before I call for the vote?
Just so you know, I got 2 calls this week.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman, am I allowed to speak, or is this just? At this point?
What do you, I'm not gonna tell you you can't speak. Come up, state your name and who you are and keep it 2 minutes.
It'll be quick. My name is Chris Wu. I'm with ECT representing EDF. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. With respect to the buffers, I think one of the key distinctions here is the prior project was utility scale, much larger in size, and from an economics perspective, certainly can afford more land, can have larger setbacks. When it comes to these smaller distributed sites, there tend to be smaller footprints, and the more trees you have on site, the more shading impacts you do have, which does reduce the overall effectiveness of the site itself. There's precedent. We presented a similar project in Richmond County, and there was a large utility scale going at the same time. And after having spoken with staff there, they agreed that we were not subject to the same utility scale criteria that they were holding to the other one, because they recognized that just the sheer size and magnitude and economics of it didn't make sense. So they agreed, and based on the similar visual analysis and visual demonstration, that they agreed that it was not going to be a visual impact. I'm not sure how much time I have, but also as a third-party consultant, also to address Mr. Yancey's comment, I would echo what Mr. Capel had said, as if somebody were to come to my company and say, give us a third-party assessment for decommissioning, we all have our integrity standards. Engineers are legally bound to that seal, and so there would not be an issue in terms of who funds that, because you're opening a whole can of worms of integrity if you can't trust a professional engineer to seal a plan. So, and in no situation in my 22 years of working in this field has a client ever asked me to make it work for them. So, and I would never allow that to happen either. So, thank you for the time.
Oh. So what's the benefit to the county at large? Not the landowner, not the solar company, since you say you got a seal. What's the benefit to the county?
Well, I'm not a professional engineer, but the benefits of the county, strictly environmentally speaking, locally sourced power with nothing but environmental benefit. I mean, there'll be some short-term erosion sediment control issues that'll be approved by both the county and the state, but beyond that, there are no environmental impacts and just benefit in terms of reduction of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrous oxides. And that's going to be experienced.
So no financial benefit, is just what we would say, the benefits you just stated.
I'm not the one who should be adjusting the finances.
Okay, well, just real quick, that was asked to me today, what does the county get out of this? I forgot to ask that question.
Sir, we do have Mr. James Wright from.
Okay, let him come up, tell me what benefit is to the county. I'm speaking more financially now than I am anything else.
From the co-op's perspective, I'm James Wright. I'm with Old Dominion Electric Co-op, who provides generation to Rappahannock Electric Co-op. The benefit here is that by doing this particular project, this is a more cost-effective way for the co-ops to do clean energy than a lot of the alternatives that we look at. It's replacing generation coming from either natural gas or coal or something else. And so it's reducing overall emissions, which has health benefits, and the members are saving money as opposed to doing a different project that's more expensive for them, but also required to happen. And those benefits.
That raises a question, because if what you're saying is that it's more advantageous for the co-ops to do this, then the co-ops are going to look for a whole series of small parcels to set up their distribution capabilities for the solar energy.
We actually did just that because we are interested in least cost clean energy.
I understand.
And we looked at out of the landscape of all the places that we can do that for all 11 of the ODEX member co-ops, we found like 12 good spots in all of Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. And this is one of them.
So you're saying that you could inundate this county if you wanted to?
No, we need, in order to do this type of project cost effectively, it needs to be near a substation that has enough customer use that we can keep all of that power local.
Correct.
Okay.
May I make one comment? Personally, I don't see the downside of having distributed power in our county. I mean, when
I'm not saying it is.
people talk about zombie apocalypse hits, I'm gonna be glad that we've got some solar power generation in our county. You know, things really go awry. I mean,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we actually have power generation in our county. I mean, it's like I know there may be some negatives, but my gosh, when I compare it to the alternatives that we sit here and let happen all the time, it's just staggering to me that we struggle so much with this.
Well, to answer that, some of us are good in math, some of us are not, and some of us are good in English, and some of us are not, so the struggle is real. I mean, it's not because that we're not trying to learn, it's just a different concept. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. I will say this, commissioners and the staff, and even advocate, we've beat this one around a long time. We whipped this all that can be beat. It's time for us to make a decision to push it up to the board of supervisors, either positive or negative. I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but I think we've been around this loop pretty good. So, final comments from anybody? I have no final comments from anybody. Then I'm gonna call for a vote.
Well, we have to make a motion.
I know, but I'm gonna get final comments. No final comments, then I solicit a motion to approve or deny on this solar project, SUP 20-05 Redfish Solar Partners LLC.
Well, I feel like it's either Mr. Yancey makes a motion to deny or I make a motion to approve.
Do what you gotta do.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve as presented. I'm not inclined to change to propose changing the frequency of the evaluation. And for all the reasons I've stated previously, my father just sent me a video recently, and a very learned gentleman who said, the time's kind of passed to wonder about whether we have to have a future without fossil fuels. Like, that discussion has to happen. Like, the future is not fossil fuels, the future of these sorts of solutions. I personally prefer this over a lot of others, and I personally would be, happy to have clean power generation within my community. So I'll make a motion to approve this presented.
With the conditions that stated by the county?
Yes, sir, with the conditions, yes.
It's been moved that we will approve it with the conditions as stated by the county. Is there a second? Is there a second? Chair seconded for roll call vote purposes, and that'll tell us where we'll leave now next.
Right.
So I would say, before we take the vote, if you say aye, you are agreeing that this goes forward to the county as presented and in the affirmative. If you say nay, then it does not go up before the county as an affirmative. It goes up, we disapprove. Okay, so we can clarify that for you. So I means we agree with it, it goes up to the county affirmative. Nay means we don't agree with it, it does not go to the county. Okay, roll call.
Ms. Elmaker,
Aye.
Mr. Hutchison, Mr. Capel,
Aye.
Mr. Yancey,
Aye.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
Goes forward 3-2.
3-2 goes to the county affirmative. Thank you so much. Thank you applicants. Thank you Farm Bureau. Thank you everybody, commissioners. I thank you. Everything was done as well as we could do it. Mr. Johnson, it's in your fellows' hands now. Congratulations. I invite you to the carnival. But we do thank you so much. That is the thing that I will say before we go on to the next work session business that to the staff, we've got to get something real quick in place to help us. If it's true that we got 5 on the horizon, 2 on the horizon, or 3 on the horizon, we need help. I'm not confident enough to just kind of just take these and just go at it and go at it and go at it and go at it and go at it. I've got to have some help here. You know, most good cooks have a recipe. most of the cooks at West. And next to the Bible, I think cookbooks are number one sellers. So that tells you what the recipes ought to be for Fairmont, okay? All right, we'll move to our work session, starting with our Germanna Wilderness Plan, GWAP planning documents, policy, development standards versus guidelines.
All right.
Mr. Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. So we need to have a technological setup here, so we'll be able to hand off. Walker, I need the ability to share screen. Thank you. Chair, members of the commission, Supervisor Johnson, this is my first briefing to you on this subject matter, and it's my first briefing to you of any type in a work session that has some detail. I was asked to present on the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan, planning documents, policies, the design standards, development standards, and any guidance that has been created as we see land use applications. So that is what I have brought to you today. We all know that the Germanna Wilderness area of Orange County, like much of Virginia and much of Orange County and our part of the world, has many layers of history. And so to begin to speak to those today is almost impossible. But I wanted to just present you with this particular graphic, which is adopted by our Board of Supervisors and is part of the comprehensive plan for our county. This is a pretty simple graphic once you know what it is, which is basically a layering of different sites from periods of history from the settlement and pre-settlement period, because we have pre-contact prehistoric sites shown on this map through the colonial period, the gold mining period, the Civil War period, the post-war period, the early 20th century through the mid-20th century. And so what we're looking at here is part of the area history. There is a particular map of Orange County that I like to use. This is one of the cartographic surveys done by one of the warring sides in the American Civil War. This was done by a Confederate soldier. They had engineers of great repute on both sides. I'm going to move into the red box. So as we look in the inset area, hopefully you can see in the upper toward the left, and I'll apologize to our audience.
Josh, hold on a second. Turn back just a little bit. So
Absolutely.
The camera is attached to it, that's the only problem.
just hold it over here.
That's all right, I can see it now.
You fine?
I will apologize on behalf of staff. Unfortunately, our TVs were not turned on tonight, and we, in our first meeting in here, don't know how to turn them on. I've corresponded with our IT people, and we'll have it fixed next time, but
Okay.
I apologize for that.
I just wanted them to be able to see what you were saying.
Absolutely. So a lot of this is going to be text heavy, so when I get there, I'm going to do some reading. Basically, this is that 1864 map in an inset, and you can see the word Germanna clearly indicated, kind of in the just left of center. If you look in the bottom right, you'll see wilderness and the wilderness run. And if you look in the bottom left corner, you can just see the word grove. And of course, that's Locust Grove. And a lot of people talk about Locust Grove being a little further to the east, but kind of the historic location is down to the southwest here. So I wanted to quickly go over the plan components and then go over the code components. So the plan components date to the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan adopted in 2015. It follows a Route 3 corridor group, an initiative that predecessors were spoken to that had begun 20 years or more ago. So the plan area, as you can see, is outlined in red on the left. Table of contents in here, we basically have 8 sub-areas. I'll just talk through those real quickly. Spotswood, Anahoic, Germanna, Wilderness Run, Lake of the Woods, Flat Run, South Wilderness, and Battlefield. You all have access to this in paper, I believe, but certainly everyone in Orange County can access this online. It's part of our adopted comprehensive plan. The planning area map on the left shows some of the features on the ground, and on the right, you can see those 8 sub-areas, starting with area 1 at the 12 o'clock position and working down through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ending up at the wilderness area, sub-area 8. Two of the components adopted with the plan include this historic and cultural resources overlay on the left, and on the right, the transportation improvements map. Former plan commissioner spoke well to the plan component, which has a parkway you can see in purple. Just to the right, the large blue body of water, which is the planned parkway that he was discussing as basically a bypass or restricted access arterial off of the current Highway 3, or as we saw on the Germanna map, the old Germanna Plank Road. So I'm not going to go through, there's no reason to go through each of the 8 areas, but I do want to show you what it looks like in form, because the template for that was repeated through each one. So in sub-area 1, Spotswood, you'll see the aerial at the time, 2015. Things have certainly changed in Germanna, even in the last 5 or 6 years. Some of it guided by the plan in small part, and much of it waiting for some of the larger master planned or massive development when land masses have been accumulated or assembled. And then a quick evaluation of land use and development, existing conditions on the right. Again, on the left, an analysis of natural features, and on the right, future conditions. This is, standard practice for your plans, your plan components. What I really want to draw attention to is the tasks to refine and implement the policies. And so I'm just going to read through these. And number 1 is to amend the zoning ordinance to establish a Route 3 corridor district. Number 2, amend the zoning ordinance to establish development standards. Number 3, amend the zoning ordinance to create planned unit development zoning districts as the primary zoning instrument, which emphasize harmonious and attractive building design and arrangement. Number 4, development, implement, and manage a utility master plan for the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan area. And develop, implement, and manage a transportation master plan for the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan area. And develop, implement, and manage a historic cultural assets and opportunities plan. So these are all recommendations that were part of this 2015 plan, some of which were fully implemented and some of which were begun but not fully implemented. And it goes on further to look at, again, existing conditions, future conditions, and tasks for refinement and implementation of economic development, infrastructure. It repeats, rinse, wash, repeat with the sub-areas, which is sub-area 2. So in the code components today, we have 3 land development districts that were adopted per the recommendation as I just called forth. The first of these is the Planned Development Business District, or PDD. I'm going to hit the highlights on some of these because these are pretty lengthy and again text heavy. So I don't want to substitute for really hitting the highlights. There are 3 of these: Planned Development Business, Planned Development Mixed Use, and Traditional Neighborhood. Each of these, however, I think it's important to note that they have a purpose and intent clearly stated, the purpose being to allow for, number 1, to be consistent with the comp plan, number 2, to be consistent with the specific Germanna Wilderness Area Plan, and number 3, to allow for flexibility, variety, and cohesiveness, in this case for commercial site design, while avoiding inefficient use of land, lack of connectivity, and lack of architectural continuity that might be typically associated with traditional zoning. So again, this is a progressive, forward-looking document, and the district, this particular district has not been mapped yet, and I'll speak to that in a minute. But this district is intended to provide avenues for commercial development that's innovative, that balances conventional priority for convenient motor vehicle access with walkability and efficiency, for pedestrian-oriented design, to use design principles that produce functional, harmonious, and attractive buildings and site layouts. This is also often called a performance standard. So as opposed to a typical design standard, which is just, it must be, fit in the round hole and be round, it's a performance standard. We want it to be able to fit into the round hole, and how you get it in the round hole is up to the particulars of your design. Take a creative approach in preserving and protecting natural site features. Again, we're aware of historic, cultural, but as well as natural resources in this area. through innovative site planning and the use of low-impact development principles. Low-impact development can mean a lot of things. One thing it can mean is the efficient use of water. So for example, to irrigate sod takes a lot of potable water. Or you can recycle that water, use gray water, and that's a low-impact development technique. And lastly, the intent is those projects that are compatible with adjoining neighborhoods and adjacent areas with respect to scale, intensity, and design. All right, this is key. This district can only be mapped in the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan. So there's the call. This district, as the others, calls for development plans by form, and it speaks to essentially master planning. Those things that are designed to be a planned development and not ad hoc or piecemeal development. So I'll just leave that on the screen for a minute without reading each one of these. So an overall development plan with certain components for signage, landscaping, land uses, and public utilities.
So just for my thought process, isn't this in the comp plan though?
Yes,
So if it's in the comp plan.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. These are directly in the code. Some
No,
of
I'm
these,
talking about the GWAP itself. Isn't that whole connotation in the comp plan?
this is the code section that is in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
All of the aspirational goals sometimes, the big picture, we would really like things to be this way, belong in a planning document. And the implementation or through application by private individuals goes into the code sections. So those things that are codified are the standards. Those things that are the goals and objectives, the wishes and the dreams go into your planning document. And then you have to find out, you have to determine how they're going to be implemented. Some of which are codified, some of which are not.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does that answer your question better? Okay. All right, so as the form then, development plans further, if there are revisions to those plans, they have to meet certain standards. Otherwise, minor plans that are not zoning changes can go before the zoning administrator. So those things that are consistent with the overall development plan, which it has to have because of the district that it is as a planned development district, minor changes can be made through administrative changes to the zoning administrator. We have site development standards in this district for minimum area, maximum lot coverage ratio, minimum number of principal separate uses, which is not really a form, connectivity, parking criteria, and landscaping. And again, you'll see some of these refer to other sections in the code. So for the example of parking criteria for planned development business, it refers to the sections in the chapter that apply to all uses. So there are no special parking design standards for planned development business in Orange County in the code. They don't exist. So the parking design standards are the same as the design standards for parking development standards throughout the county. Okay, those things that are specified here are specific to this particular district. Outdoor lighting, the same, meets the general standards. We have supplementary standards related to lighting. Perimeter buffer. Yes, Mr.
Just
Henderson.
one point on the parking.
Sure.
When the working group went and viewed a whole bunch of these multi-use communities, one of the issues that did come up was the discussion of shared parking. Because of space, what that essentially meant is that both the business and the residential, based on hours that they work, would share the parking, which you're right, it's not part of what's in Orange County right now, but that was a discussion issue.
Sure. Actually, Commissioner Hutchison, I have the ability to receive a shared parking plan and approve it. So if a church and an apartment building want to share parking today, they could come up with a plan and propose it, and it could be approved. Now, truly mixed use is covered more by the next district which you have in your code. Again, this is plan development related to something that's primarily non-residential business.
Understand.
Right. But this one is one of your more limited in your uses. All right, so we have, but we do have a specified buffer here. So any PDB, Plan Development Business District, that adjoins residential properties zoned residential, or properties that are zoned agricultural that have a residential use, must have a 25-foot buffer. That is a design standard, that's a development standard in this code. Public utilities are covered, public water and sewer must be used. Underground or utilities shall be placed underground, that's a requirement for new development. We do have a standard about streets meeting the SSAR or secondary street acceptance requirements for VDOT, unless it's deemed appropriate otherwise. And then signage has both a somewhat aspirational master plan intent and a very specific standard, which is that the district, one contiguous district, shall have one freestanding sign. Again, there's an out unless it's determined otherwise necessary. We have building standards. Again, we can go through these. Maximum height, minimum setbacks in yards, screening of mechanical equipment from public rights of way, not necessarily from your adjoining private neighbors. Refuse receptacles, some standards for that they be opaquely screened. Again, this is a dumpster enclosure or something like that. Building materials that are not permitted in this district are metal siding and non-architectural concrete block that would be visible from a public right-of-way. However, on the sides of the back, if it's not a public right-of-way that they would be visible from, it's permitted. And then there's a % maximum there. We have some standards for interrupted by recesses, so basically advancing and receding planes in your buildings to reduce the monotony of the building. And then some requirements for outdoor screening, opaque screening of outdoor storage. Again, standard requirement that we have in our commercial and industrial districts also. So it's specific to this district. It's a little different than the commercial and industrial districts in the county otherwise, but we have a standard similar to this in our other districts that allow outdoor storage. All right, on to number 2, planned development mixed use. And to Mr. Hutchinson's point, this is where we would expect to see any variety of uses, not just non-residential commercial uses. So here again, the purpose is very similar. You'll see interrelated and compatible. But it goes further to say commercial, institutional, residential, and recreational uses within an interconnected, pedestrian-oriented neighborhood. And the word neighborhood could have been development, because frankly, a planned development mixed use of a large size is likely going to have a number of neighborhoods. So you could have, for example, Wilderness Crossing at 2,600 acres is really a series of neighborhoods, potentially, just like any master plan development can be. If you go into Lake of the Woods, there are sections and components that don't always have the same neighborhood orientation. Again, Lake of the Woods is more cohesive than some master plan developments. So it goes a little further and it talks about the intent. Again, this is both taking the language from the planning documents and putting them in code, providing a level of density and intensity to promote dynamic and convenient neighborhood. Again, with large developments, you may have more than one neighborhood center, so you may actually have some components. But this is what is required. There has to be a both objective and subjective evaluation of what that level of density and intensity is. So that's a requirement. Exemplify the traditional communities, and it calls for some characteristics of those. Take a creative approach to preserving and protecting natural site features. I try to have this conversation, as should we all, on every site development, but it's specifically required by code in the PDM. And then efficient use of land to preserve open space and limit impacts on surrounding properties. Again, only can be mapped in the Germanna Wilderness area. It is not to be mapped outside of that in other parts of Orange County. Very similar to the PDB, the PDM has a form, requires a master plan or overall development plan, and those have to have certain components, design guidelines specific to that project, their circulation transportation plan, plan for open space and recreational facilities, master signage, generalized land use, landscape plan, and a public utilities plan. So you start to see again where these development standards are going.
And see, Josh, that's what I think we need for solar. Something that outlines that specificity when it comes into the county. So they go to GWAP, they know if you're gonna do this, this is what's expected.
Yep.
And that's what we've got to have for that type of module, I think also, to make it easier for everyone.
If I may respond to that, I would say, number one, I agree that having some form and format, as this one does, and establishes a form, is always helpful. Your basic components that are not part of the building footprint area, the parking area, are basically landscape, lighting, and signage. And those are your three main, somewhat discretionary items that float around on the landscape. So once your building site is selected and if you have parking, your parking is provided on site, then you're really looking at landscape, lighting, and signage. And of course, for a solar production facility, they have no signage. So that one goes away. We're not evaluating signage. Then we're looking at landscaping and lighting. Most of these, of course, have no lighting. So we're really looking at landscaping as the one item that I would normally expect to see as part of an application. Follows the same format for major and minor revisions, those things that basically change the density, the circulation system, the access points, the types of land uses, or any substantial change in building design or site design have to come back through a zoning change. Minor revisions can be approved administratively. We have, again, area standards, minimum area. To establish a district is 20 acres. That's the minimum requirement. So you couldn't do a 19-acre planned development mixed use, which of course happen in cities all over the world. Planned development mixed use can be smaller than 20 acres. However, the intent in Germanna is to have Germanna Wilderness, as much assembly as possible. So planned development can be larger and more cohesive and more integrated, because the more is controlled under one development scheme, the more integration you have. There is a minimum set aside for non-residential development between 10 to 30%, which is basically 10. The minimum standard is 10, but you cannot have a planned development mixed use without 10% non-residential use. Maximum gross residential density, no more than 6 units per acre, calls for some additional detail. Minimum area for common open space, 20%, calls out what the criteria are for those open space, just like your considerations or criteria might be for a use like utility scale solar or solar production facilities. You can have criteria or considerations that either these things are always permitted, but they have to be done this way. For example, screening is to be opaque. That's a standard. And then there's some opportunity in here for density bonuses, and you'll see the same in the residential district. So there are a lot of guidelines. And these guidelines, again, I'll put it up on the screen. I don't want to read all these because it's too much, but just realize we've now changed the wording from development standards and criteria to guidelines. So they are more general, and they provide, again, that higher level of intent and purpose without as much detail. Now, we do have some detail about access points and some minimum standards, but some of this is just guidance. That continues. We have criteria for sidewalks. Again, landscaping is, so again, sidewalk is a very specified criteria. This is a standard. Landscaping, on the other hand, says it needs to be established as part of the planning documents. It's not specified by code, which again is appropriate. There is no, that is my opinion, but there is no landscape character in the Germanna Wilderness area, planning area, that would dictate a landscaping requirement. There, you know, you go to Natchez, Mississippi, you're going to see live oak trees with Spanish moss draped all over them. You go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, you're going to see adobe houses everywhere. They have a character that is clear and cohesive. Germanna Wilderness, as we looked at with the circle all over the place, has been settled and developed for hundreds of years, and it has a character that follows those hundreds of years, and we're part of that change over time. So it wouldn't be appropriate, in my opinion, to have a landscape standard in this district. Your lighting criteria refer to the county lighting criteria. Parking standards refer to the parking criteria for the county parking standards. There is a specified requirement here: detached garages shall only be located in rear and side yards and shall not extend beyond the front plane of the dwelling, which basically means there's a derogatory term for this called snout house, but basically you cannot have the front of the garage extend beyond the front of the house. So what that does is it encourages people to have porches and interactions with their neighbors and sidewalks, and not have the street facade be, and we can certainly point to many places in the world where this has been built, where 2 and 3 car garages are pretty much what you see on the street, and not even a front door. It's impossible, it's so far back. So this does have a requirement that it cannot extend beyond the front plane of the dwelling. Some signage criteria as established by plan, again, up to the planning documents. And then I won't go through all these, but again, building standards. They're very similar to the PDB standards. The PDM standards and PDB standards are very similar. It just requires public water and wastewater to go underground. All right, so that's the end of that one. Now we're in the last one: plan development, traditional design, known as R5, the last residential district created in the county. So again, where is it intended and what is it intended to do? This one is a little different than the other districts because it is a single-use district, and some of these are more standardized, and so we see some clear development standards in here. But again, some of it is also based on kind of a high-minded approach to achieve certain things without specifying how to get there. Only in Germanna Wilderness area. All right, same thing, master plan, when you know overall master plan, how do you make changes, major or minor? And what does it take? 20 acres, unless it's within a quarter mile of a commercial district, in which case it can be reduced to, an existing already planned commercial area within a quarter mile. The minimum area can be reduced down to 15. That's kind of a planning standard that becomes codified. Public water and sewer, underground utilities, no more than 40-foot tall buildings. So you can't have a 5-story apartment building in the R5 district, even though apartment buildings are permitted uses. Landscaping, basically developed by the planning documents. However, it does say that street trees shall generally be planted to form a canopy. It's the first time we see this pop up in the code. So at maturity. So in evaluating a tree species, we need to determine what the mature height of it is, what the spread is, and whether it forms a canopy at mature height. And then there are some specific models that are given for types of housing forms that are permitted in the R5. As you look through these, you can see duplexes, side-by-sides, fourplexes or quadplexes, a bungalow courtyard apartments, apartments in general. So these are all the kind of the list. This is the narrative list of all the things that were illustrated above, including live-work unit, and there are some specific things governing live-work units as development standards. And this is a requirement. Within the R5, at least 3 forms of housing must be provided within this section. So there's a unit mix requirement. You can't bring in a project that's all townhouses. And we have a lot of projects within Germanna Wilderness that pre-exist this district that of course are of one type, all townhouses, or all single-family detached. Live-work units, if provided, they have to be located in the same area within the development. So what this means is you couldn't have a corner unit with, a corner coffee shop or a corner what people just used to call the corner store, with an apartment above it, and somewhere else in the development, another unit like that, because this prohibits that. These have to be provided within the same area within the development. Distribution of housing specifically talks about the higher density. Housing needs to be located to your offsite non-residential, so basically put your higher density activities closer to where people can walk. And then there's a build-to zone, which basically talks about where buildings are constructed not being set back from streets, but being built to streets. And so basically it says you can't build further back than 25 feet from a public road. And this is, of course, the flip of what most zoning does, existing zoning in other districts in the county. You can't build past 25 feet, or you can't build closer than 25 feet. And there are some further standards about the form being generally arranged in blocks, streets, alleys, building lots, and open space areas, so that there be a pattern, that the block layout not exceed 1,350 linear feet, unless it's to get you to your open space or it is the side of open space. Again, garages in this case shall not face the frontage road in which the lot is oriented. So if in this case, not only can a garage not be in a rear or side yard, it cannot face the street in which the front door is located. And there's some criteria for open space, and shall not exceed 6 units per acre without density bonuses. And the density bonuses, there's some scenarios for density bonuses. Again, these are somewhat regulating standards, but really this is an incentive. And then lastly, there are standards related to transportation of vehicles and pedestrians, as well as the provision for parking. On-street parking is encouraged, again, not required. There's no minimum. For every one space of off-street parking, there shall be one space of on-street parking, or no more than 80% of off-street, or no more than 80% of parking shall be off-street. It's ideal, but not a requirement. And then it does have a standard for sidewalks provided both sides of the streets, and we know the streets have to be public streets. There is, however, a provision that shared use paths, which are essentially asphalt pavement paths, they can be, the VDOT standard is 8 feet wide, can be provided, and in that case, you could use your shared use path system or your trail system to replace the requirement for sidewalks on both sides of every street, because you have an off-street circulation system for people. And then this is actually slightly out of order in the code. This graphic is in the middle of connectivity. This graphic is inserted between C and D. So for connectivity, you'd see this graphic, and then D for parking and E for sidewalks. But for looking at tonight, I put it up on the screen. And basically it just illustrates what is intended when connectivity is described, poor connectivity versus excellent connectivity. In this particular traditional design, commercial uses are not permitted in the R5 district, so this would be an adjoining commercial zoning district where the R5 district adjoins the commercial district. And that is a walk through the plan components and the code components as it relates to Germanna Wilderness Area. Commissioner Powell, Mr. Brooks.
Yes, go ahead.
So so those districts that you just went through, someone who wants to build in GWAP would propose one of those districts to basically have a rezoning. I want to do PDM, and it's whatever, I don't know this, it's 50 acres, and here's my plan. So when it talks about a master plan, it's a master plan for that particular development.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so depending on what they pick or what they're proposing, then that would be the set of standards that we would compare against.
That is exactly right. And again, some of the things in the code are real specific. They are standards, and some are not. They are a little more goal oriented.
And so I'm glad you did this. So when I talked about this previously with Signature Station, I think I was incorrect that there were more standards than I thought. I don't remember which zoning district did Signature Station say they were going to be?
No, that's a great question. So they are taking residential and commercial zone properties, do you remember their R district? Well, they have an R district and a C district. The properties along the highway are zone C2 currently, and the back properties are residential 3 maybe, I don't remember the district. And they have proposed PDM, Plan Development Mixed Use. And so within the district, they would be bringing forth a development plan, which they've done, and it would need to meet these development standards.
So, and this is not a criticism, right? But in theory, when that was presented to the planning commission, I didn't really put that together, but we would have maybe had that with, I don't remember how it was presented. I just, I didn't really understand how that all, now that you've briefed it, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. And that was like 5 years ago, however long. So, okay, so what we should have been doing is looking at their proposal against the PDM standards.
Yeah, but the problem was, not to interrupt, is that their first approval was pre-GWAP. And then when they came back and asked for their modifications or their changes, it didn't quite comply with GWAP because some of the GWAP standards had not really been put into place. Here's the GWAP idea, but the complete GWAP had not been accepted in that area. So they could have done that, but to compel them to that, I don't think we could have.
Are they, is that correct? Or
Signature Station was pre-approved, I'm not.
It was, but I thought they came back
And they did.
to basically rezone under the GWAP.
They did.
No, I thought they came back just to rezone.
They were required to do it under the GWAP, basically because they couldn't meet the commercial requirement under the original agreement of 50%.
Right, but when they came back then under GWAP, there were still some things we couldn't hold them to under GWAP because we hadn't had some of the GWAP instituted into the code and into the actual planning
There
area.
was no ARC review, application review committee of the Signature Station, to my knowledge.
There was an ARC review committee last summer.
Is that right?
Correct, there was. And in that committee, which is typically done through the Orange County agencies and the outside agencies that comment on applications in the ARC
Planning
process.
Commission's part of that ARC, and to my knowledge, we were not invited.
There are no codified provisions for the Planning Commission members to participate in the ARC. What we have recommended in the Wilderness Crossing, and what we've done is we've had the two members for the districts and both the commissioners and the
Correct.
supervisors participating.
But that's
It's
for
not-
Wilderness Crossing, not to stop it. That wasn't for Signature Station. And while I got you stopped,
Sure.
pull George and Sandra back up so they can get.
Oh,
back
sure.
to it,
Well,
if you
they're-
don't mind.
I think they're there. You just-
Oh, they're there, okay, I just can't see.
No, I'll turn off.
I can't see George's hand if he wanted me.
I'm sharing my screen, so let me see if I can. No, that doesn't do it, does it? I have to turn off my PowerPoint.
We still have a quorum without him, he may have left, but I just wanna make sure that if he wants to be in it, I can see.
Yeah, it would have been nice to know about the ARC for Signature Station. I didn't know about it.
I recall being told that,
There was a lot we didn't know.
I didn't know about it.
I mean, who here looked at the PDM standards
That's what I'm
and compared their plan? This was kind of my point, was like, you may have, because you've been.
Well, that's why I said, it was codified when you brought up the point that the code was sufficient to cover that. But I didn't know about the review. That, to me, that's an
so I guess my
important
question is GWAP is instituted now, Josh, as a mandate when the whole guideline and packet is accepted?
So there is an application packet, a form, a particular application form that's used for GWAP.
Okay.
But it does not require participation by the board members or planning commission members who participated quite heavily in a lot of the planning process, really far before the 2015 adoption of the.
But all the requirements in GWAP is required by every applicant in that area. So GWAP applies to every applicant that applies, so the GWAP has been completely accepted.
Only
Yes,
for the G-
absolutely.
Only for the GWAP area.
Well, that's right, that's
Right.
why we call it GWAP.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So and it's been accepted by the board also.
Well, of course, remember that the short answer is yes, but the long answer is, remember, it was an update to the comprehensive plan for a specific part of the county.
Right.
So in 2015, when GWAP was adopted, that was an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
And so,
Okay.
so where is Signature Station right now? Is it gone to the board already?
Yes.
You have made your recommendation. The board is scheduling a work session to discuss it.
And the board, forgive me, I know you guys are so smarter than us, but you're aware,
I'm begging to differ with you, Mr. Nobel.
you know all this now, right? Like we didn't, I mean, you're hearing here that we did not compare their plan to the PDM.
Yes, I'm aware, and I have spoken to other board members, that the process, you all kind of just approach Signature Station sort of like any other rezoning, instead of this sort of extra layer of
GWAP.
here's the GWAP standards. So yes, in my opinion, something fell through the cracks there. We've got a situation where, obviously the last year has been highly unusual. And Josh has only been here for a few months, and this is brand new to everybody. So, yes, you all should have been able to look at that in light of, you should have been able to hold the GWAP standards up and what they were doing up and say,
See if they cross,
do these work together?
Yeah.
Well, I mean.
And as I was in the Zoom meeting, and I sort of, the penny dropped that had not happened in this case. So that's one reason that we're doing a work session at the board level, so we can go through that and get, because it's really, the idea of GWAP is that, at really at every step, there'll be this working out. So the planning staff does it, then the planning commission does it, then the board does it.
And yeah, and in defense, I mean, all your points, and I wasn't trying to poke at people. I mean, everything was there for us to figure out what needed to be done. It's just, we're usually kind of spoon fed it, and so that just didn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
that's all.
I can see on the screen there that Sandra Thornton was trying to talk.
I did see that. We're having a technical issue, and I'm gonna
That's what I
ask,
was trying to get to also.
Yeah. I've asked Walker, our technical support, if he can help us get our Zoom screen back on this screen. I don't know why it's gone away.
Here we go, here we go. There's Mr. Yancey.
Oh, George is awake.
There's Sandra, okay.
Sandra, based on that conversation we were having, what were you gonna add?
I believe what I was going to add was that in the discussion about the application review committee, and Josh, basically did answer. Last summer, I did circulate to ARC members the application materials. What I didn't have, I guess, codified in the application form or any process materials that at my disposal was information about other, entities that should have been included in that review process. So Mr. Hutchison is correct that planning commission members were not involved, board members were not involved. I did seek various agencies input on the proposal that we had received. And I think that probably the original staff report did reference, what we got back in the way of comments, which were not very extensive.
Thank you. And Sandra, you did review this in accordance with the development standards for the PDM district.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, Mr. Gillespie, you did a fine job of presenting that, the overview of it to make sure we keep that in mind. Some pretty good work done on that GWAP plan. There was a lot of utensils and a few bucks spent on it too.
Josh, if I remember correctly, in addition, and part of the comp plan, the infrastructure plans are also included there. Transportation, water, sewage is part of the comp plan under the GWAP.
Yes, Mr. Hutchison, they are. That's why I had those two particular documents early on, the adopted transportation plan, the adopted historic and cultural resources plan. Frankly, we need to update the comprehensive plan for this county. And there are areas that need to be addressed completely as new uses on the landscape, including solar, which, will have its day in the sun, so to speak. But we will move on. But in addition to that, utilities and transportation in this county has a fairly small portion of being addressed in the comprehensive plan. And those are areas that probably do need some additional information included in the comprehensive plan when it's studied. However, in the GWAP area in particular, there were much more detailed studies done within that planning area than have been done across the entire county. So those components that are in the adopted GWAP plan that show the transportation map, that is one item that was adopted by the board that came out of the planning process. On the other hand, the water and sewer study, as you know, came to a point, but it is not adopted. It is not an adopted plan at this point. So
it's the white elephant.
Okay. All right, well, we can't stay on this.
One question from Signature Station.
Okay.
On a still complex price. So this was a question we had, that they had basically proffered something less than the lighting standard. So applicants aren't able to do that, is that correct?
I'd like Sandra to speak to that. Talking about a negative profit, basically.
Sure.
Did you get that, Ms. Thornton?
And Eric also got one.
Did you hear that?
I did. I think as we had discussed it, I know it was not their intent to proffer anything less than what would be required by the zoning ordinance. I don't remember. I think that particular item may have been in reference to the outdoor lighting standards.
Yeah, it was the lighting. I'm
I
just
think it was the
curious.
lighting, and the standards, in the ordinance that is applicable to all development would apply.
Okay, so they can't, so
So they
that
can't.
would not hold up. It would, if they proffered less and we by accident accepted it, that wouldn't hold up in court.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to that.
That's
Yes.
what I'm asking.
Yeah, what was proffered regarding the lighting standards was fine. By analogy, let's suppose you had, say, a rule that said a fence has to be at least 4 feet high. And then you have another rule that says the fence has to be at least 5 feet high. Do those two rules conflict with each other? They don't. What would conflict is if you had a rule that said the fence must be at least 4 feet high, and then another one that says it can be no more than 3 feet high. Right, so when you have two standards that both establish minimum requirements, and they don't explicitly conflict with each other, then the more restrictive of the two standards controls. And so that's what we had going on in those proffered standards. We have a lighting ordinance within our zoning ordinance that establishes certain rules about how lighting is to be conducted. And then there were additional provisions regarding lighting in the proffers. But there wasn't any explicit contradiction between the two. Certainly the proffers were less intense in their wording. But if there are any two standards where one of those two is more strict than the other, then the more restrictive, whichever of those two will apply.
And so
Does that make sense?
Sort of, I would quibble over the interpretation, but so is a proffer a standard then?
Yeah, a proffer is established by ordinance.
So if
So
someone
it's-
proffers something less than a standard, and the standard is more restrictive than the standard in court, if someone were to challenge it, the standard would, the
Prevail.
proffer would basically go away and they'd have to live up to the higher standard.
If you had a condition in a rezoning or in an SUP that actually conflicted with your zoning ordinance, then the zoning ordinance would prevail. If there was actually a
If the
conflict.
zoning ordinance says a fence 4 feet high.
Yeah.
And I proffer one 3, do
Uh-huh.
I have to build a 4-foot fence?
You have to build a 4 foot
Okay,
fence.
thank you.
That's the question he was asking. Yes, I was trying to get there too.
Yeah.
I think both of y'all said the same thing, but you would say it a different way, is that, so that the actual GWAP would prevail over anything that somebody presented to us if we omitted and accepted a proffer that was less than the GWAP plan.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. But they don't conflict, then whichever standard is more restrictive applies.
You waving at me, you.
I am, Mr. Brooks. So I would just add, in some localities that do allow legislative approval of exceptions to code requirements, that they often will make that a specific request. So you may have one request, which is for a zoning district, which includes conditions. And a second request might be a request for exceptions to ordinance standards. And it might be 10 ordinance standard exceptions that are requested, whatever it is, but they are clearly understood to be different requests and separate. In Orange County, we really don't have a process to have exceptions to ordinance standards, and so it's not even on the table. They can't do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sandra, thank you all for what you did. Now, I promised commissioners that we would not be here too long, so let's move along rapidly. Not that it's not important, but I did promise that. Planning Commission work update.
Yes, sir. So I want to say I have heard from most of you, but not all. And so I would love to have a few more items to put into a table and bring back to our next meeting. Most of what we've heard relates to some of the topical items that we have had. Update terms in the zoning ordinance, look at areas to tighten up potential conflicts in the zoning ordinance. And so those are things we're looking at, and things that are in the code sections related to the subdivision and division of land. Mr. Pell in particular gave me some other items, and so we can, we'll be looking at all of those. But that's my report, just for brevity tonight. I would like to bring that to you in a table, and I would like a little more input from anybody else on those items.
Before we go past GWAP too, everybody who does not have a GWAP plan, they ask for us if we can get it. And that way we will know what we're working with.
It's easier.
Mr. Brooks, I appreciate that.
That would get everybody on to have it in their possession.
If by a show of hands, is that the four of you here, or do any of you have print copies already?
I think Hutch gave me his.
I've got a printed copy, but
Okay, so 3 for this room.
Julie's gonna read mine.
Okay.
Yeah,
One for Mr.
he's
Yancey.
agreeing with Mr. Hutchinson. He's agreeing with himself over here. Julie's agreeing.
All right, we'll produce those.
All right, Mr. Johnson, you up, my friend?
I have no report. I'm glad to be back amongst you in person. But otherwise.
Glad to have you back. Mr. Gillespie, you got anything else?
I do just want to add, we did circulate before the meeting and print copies of your bylaws.
Okay.
And I think your interactions with folks today went particularly well because of the one topic that we had and not 3 or 4 or 5. That sort of conversational dialogue is challenging to maintain, and there are more items on the agenda. So I would encourage all of you to go back through the bylaws, and if there are any changes that we need to make those. I asked Tracy to hit a couple of the items that we flagged. We have changed the name of the department to Planning and Development Services, which includes the scope of services from planning and land use and land development applications through building permitting, building inspections, codes enforcement, code inspections. So that is our new name, Planning and Development Services. Also, in your bylaws, you do specifically refer to meeting in this room. And I am not the person to be proud of saying this, although I'll be proud to be a user. But we do have a public safety building which is under construction in Orange County out near the airport, which will have the new public meeting room and the board chambers. It is scheduled for completion this summer. Fingers crossed that happens. Your meetings will not be in the board and building anymore as specified in your bylaws. So you need to look at that. We need to talk about the change. And then lastly, you do have a kind of a provisional provision, you've made a provisional schedule to have 2 commission meetings per month, in part to cover the period in time in which public hearings were being advertised and held open without the ability for people to come and address you in person. And so part of your schedule was to facilitate the ability for people to have at you and the commission to conduct your business with those extended public hearing opening periods. So just to note, right now your schedule is calling for, by vote of the commission, for 2 meetings per month, but by your bylaws, your second meeting is an alternate meeting. So I'm not suggesting or recommending a change, I'm just pointing out that, you know, we are beginning hopefully to return to business as usual, and business as usual will not be conducted in this building forever. The public's business will be down at the public safety building.
So the only thing I would say to all of that, that's perfectly good, but I'm gonna ask the commission to hang on to that until we actually make the move. Because if we change it now, we'll be just as wrong as we would be if we took this there. Because it's gonna state things that are not necessarily happening. So let the bylaws stay until we move to the public safety building, then we can put that into place. And then we'll be more focused at that time to make a determination about our meetings and how we have them and things like that. So while this is great work, I didn't see anything really that gave me the heartburn. I'm just gonna put it on the back burner until we actually make the move and these things, so we don't have to change our bylaws but once.
Very good.
Because we really couldn't change and say we meet in the public safety building right now, but we don't have a public safety building to meet at. So we are correct that we meet here, but in the future, it will be more correct. So let's hang on to that until about July, August. What do we think about going in there? September?
Possibly as early as July, but July or August, I would say at this point.
Okay.
Are they finishing up just the punch list, or?
We're getting close to, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure exactly. It's been a long process, but yeah, we're getting into the final stages of it. And once the contractor's done, then the county will still have a few things to get done, so.
Okay. So we'll just wait on that. I think that'll work well for us. I'm hoping that's legally sound.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if we want to continue holding our meetings on the 3rd Thursday of the month as well, then we can make that decision on a case-by-case basis in the meanwhile. And the bylaws do provide. Yeah, and the bylaws do provide that, unless it's otherwise announced and advertised, it will be in the administration building. So when we get to that first meeting where we're wanting to have a meeting in the public safety building, then it can just be announced and advertised without amending the bylaws. But once we're ready for that amendment, we can certainly do it.
All right, do we have any commissioner comments?
I just have one.
Sure.
So you had mentioned the solar standards.
Yes.
And I completely agree that we need some sort of standard, some sort of guidance. But I do believe an SUP is the way to go, because
I'm 100% believer of that.
because we need the flexibility to say, to say no when it's warranted.
I agree with that.
And we need the flexibility to say yes when it's warranted. And I like that SUPs, give us that flexibility. So I'm more of in the camp of a hybrid solution, so.
Well, going right down the line, I'll echo everything Jason said on that and just add one 10-second comment that remember, once things get approved and they're put in ordinances, pretty much standard for a minute. We don't change ordinances very often. SUP allows us to control it. And I heard the gentleman say that I didn't challenge him, he said that there was only 12 in Orange County, in the state, and Orange County was one of them. I want to know what these other 4 or 5 that everybody telling me to apply for, where they going then?
He was talking that particular.
I understand, I get it,
small-
that particular small operation, but my point is, while his little nugget only can fit there are other folks that not so much worried about the rest, so it could be, his small operation is less troublesome to us overall than a big operation that we have no control over, or limited control. And I also wanted to ask this as the second thing. Can we get the new law on solar? Somebody told me on the phone today, there's not a lot of new legislation that was coming down from the legislator about solar July 1. Did VACO, Mr. Johnson, get us anything like that about solar? Is there something? I understand some group of counties and things were happening about solar, and the law was to prohibit or restrict how much we could do.
I'm not aware of any new legislation, but
There were some minor
there
changes.
may be.
There were some minor changes this year. They relate to the taxable value of machinery and equipment. That was one. And there was a proposal, there are always two sides, right? So there was a proposal that would have not been to the benefit of the localities, and then there was a proposal to the benefit of the localities, and it went in the localities' favor. So essentially, they will be held to a higher value, and they can be taxed for a longer period of time. It's a tweak,
Yeah.
it's a minor change.
Yeah, I was aware of that. I didn't realize, you know, I was thinking about something newer than that, or more recent than that. I lose track of of when the stuff was done, but yeah, supposedly the taxing authority is a little bit more advantageous to us than it
And
was.
that's what I was kind of getting at when I said.
And there is,
what's the benefit?
we're, you know, there's all kinds of coalitions and consortiums out there of various counties looking into this, but I'm not aware of any major changes.
Eric says he's got 2 minutes or less to give us some few things on.
Yeah, just a couple of things to add to that. One is that the General Assembly gave localities permission to impose siting agreements for solar facilities. And that's a tremendous benefit to the planning commission and the board, because as you know, and as I've emphasized many times, you know, any regulation on an SUP or rezoning has to be land use related. But the siting agreement provision allows this commission or the board to impose more extensive regulations as it deems appropriate. And then finally, the General Assembly has also given boards of supervisors the authority to take cash proffers for solar facilities that are the power is more extensive than what this. Yeah, it's much more extensive than what we in the county would normally possess.
Be going the other way.
So one quick question to that, is that when they apply, that the new law applies to, or when it is approved, the new law applies to? So in other words, if I apply in May,
Yeah,
put my application in May, but the new law takes effect July 1,
yeah,
which one?
it's whenever it's approved.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm finished. You have anything?
Sandra, the 2 calls I got on queries for solar farms, I referred them to you.
Okay,
You can tell them thank you later.
You like to get
I'll be waiting.
All right, is there any, Mr. Yancey? Any commissioner comments? Wake up. Any comments, further comments, questions?
Hey, George.
All right. I know you're tired of me. Best of luck with you, buddy. I understand what you're going through. And so, all right, I solicit a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second for us to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, stay here till we get back. Okay, ayes have it.
Mr. Brooks, thank you for letting us in. I'm going to recommend to my board of supervisors member that you all get a raise. A pay raise.
Okay, we'll tell it right now. He's gonna tell you the budget is done for this year.
Can you say later that I was